Welcome to the Shared Path. I'm Maggie Linton. We celebrate Pride Month with three powerhouse New York Times bestselling and major award-winning authors with stories geared toward teens. Jason June, Sonora Reyes, and Abdi Nazemian have teamed up with Epic Reads to shed light on the joy and triumphs of queer teens and their supportive families. Welcome all of you to the Shared Path.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. Great to be with
Okay,
you.
Jason, we're going to start with you.
All right.
And I want to know when you realized that you were gay and that you needed to write to tell your story.
Yeah. So I realized that I was gay very young, but I didn't have the words to describe it. I was probably 4 years old when I remember having my first crush on a guy, and that was watching The Little Mermaid and being enamored with Prince Eric and King Triton, just so drawn to them in a way that I realized the other boys in my circle were not drawn to them the same way that I was. And it was just an innocent, cute little kid crush. And then it was, obviously post-puberty years and everything that it was like, oh no, wait, I am gay. And at that same time, when I was about 15, 16, I stopped reading altogether, and I was a huge reader. And in hindsight, it was because I realized I wasn't reading any characters that were like me. And this was in the early 2000s. And so that was what really stimulated the drive to be a writer of queer literature when I became an adult, was to be able to create those stories so that there weren't teens that felt so alone and unrepresented in books.
Nora, same question.
Oh, sure. So I kind of similar. I guess I had hints that I was queer like very early on. I think I had my first kiss when I was like 6 years old with a girl. I never thought anything of it until like I got a little bit older and started getting the messaging that that was like not okay. So for the longest time, like until I was probably like maybe 11 or 12, I just thought it was like normal, like to like whoever you like. And it wasn't until then that I started getting like messaging like outside, because I was pretty sheltered, getting messaging that it was like bad or wrong. And I think the reason why I decided to write about my experience and write about like being queer is I just wanted to, with my first book, I wanted to process some of my like Catholic school trauma and stuff. And my second book, I just don't think I could write a book without like a queer character, because it's just so like integral to like who I am. So all my characters are queer and like across all my books. So
Okay, yeah, I understand that. And Abdi, tell me about you.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
also,
I
you
think I
two,
was.
with you and Sonora also have these opposite backgrounds too, Latina, Iranian. So that I'm sure had something to do with it too.
Of course. I mean, I think when you're dealing with intersectional identity, you're dealing with sometimes uniting two pieces of yourself that don't naturally fit together. I mean, I think I knew I was gay at 11, but like Jason June said, I didn't have words for it. There were no queer Iranians that I knew of, and you know, honestly, there wasn't even a word in our language that wasn't a slur at that point to describe gay people. I mean, that's how invisible we were. In another world, I would have known sooner. I should have known sooner. I mean, by 7, I was obsessed with Madonna. By 10, with Joan Crawford and Judy Garland. Like, I was gay, you know? But I think for me, when I started to write, and I started my career as a film and TV writer, and I wanted to tell personal stories and found it so hard to get these stories made in Hollywood. And so when I started writing books, it was purely to try and tell a story that was personal. And I remember an academic telling me, I think this is true, I'm not sure, that my first novel was the first to have a gay Iranian man as a lead character. And when I heard that, it galvanized me to just write more and more. I know there are so many queer Iranians. I want to fill the world with stories about us, because, you know, if the first was in 2014 when my first book came out, that's really frightening. We have to make up for a void in representation, and I don't want young queer Iranians or any young people to feel that their identities aren't valid and represented and celebrated in the arts.
No, all three of you, I admire the fact that you're writing for that younger crowd who may still be searching for acceptance, not really understanding what's going on, and the drive that you give in order to tell their stories, I think is just absolutely fantastic. And where do you find your stories? Do you look back at your background, or do you see other events happening that you know a story needs to be told? And anybody can jump in. Let's just make this a. I'm not going to call on you, but
Sure,
yeah.
I'll begin. You know, for me, my books tend to be very emotionally autobiographical. Especially with the last three books, I've really leaned into historical fiction, and one of the reasons is that I'm just very obsessed with trying to make sense of my own history, which was kept hidden from me when I was young, both the trauma of what happened in Iran and also queer history because of the shame and stigma. So, you know, I wrote a novel called Like a Love Story, which was very much about what it felt like to grow up a gay immigrant moving to New York at the worst moment in the HIV/AIDS epidemic. I wrote a book that was about the culture of abuse in boarding school, which was inspired by my own time in boarding school. And my latest book, Only This Beautiful Moment, is an intergenerational story about three Iranian men navigating the 1930s, the 70s, and present day. And it's very much inspired by both my family and other immigrant families that are all piecing together these jagged histories. And so I do take inspiration from my own life. I then fictionalize it and try and make it, you know, give it a more robust plot than life can sometimes have. But I do, yeah, I love telling personal stories.
Same for me. I typically have a tiny seed of truth from my own life in each of my books, and typically from questions that I had when I was a teenager. So like for my first novel, Jay's Gay Agenda, the question I wanted to explore was, is anybody else as horny as I am? And that's what we talked about in this sex positive queer story where I got to see all these things like American Pie, where straight guys got to talk about their hormones and their horniness, but gay guys never got to. And it was celebrated for straight people. So I wanted to create in Jay's Gay Agenda the queer celebration of that. Or like in Out of the Blue, the question that I was asking oftentimes when I was a teen was like, do I have to stay here, the physical place I'm in, for the rest of my life? Or am I gonna be able to get out of this area and create my own world and my own bubble and my own safe spaces I wanna live in? And my most recent novel, Riley Weaver, is like, who says that each gender has to display themselves a certain way? Why can't there be play and fun in all of that? So yeah, it's typically the questions that I had as a teen that lead me to writing my stories for young adults today.
I love that. I feel like something similar with me, like it's not so much the questions, but there's like a moment in time that I want to explore with all my novels. So with the Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School, my first book, it was the moment in time of when I went to Catholic school and when I was, you know, just like, you know, queer in Catholic school and trying to find myself coming out and all of that. With the Luis Ortega Survival Club, it was what happens if someone who isn't like the perfect victim gets to still have that perfect happy ending with the, you know, get back at the person who hurt them and everything like that. So yeah, it's definitely like I like to kind of therapize myself through my writing and get to feel better about certain things that maybe I kept to myself for a while and then finally get to share it.
You know, though, with your latest novel, you take on a whole bunch. And the fact that it's autism, you talk about, you know, with your lead character being autistic, being gay, queer, with, in a sense, like you said, not being yes or no with Louis, and the whole complexity of this novel really hits a lot of doors, and you open them.
Thank you. Yeah,
Uh,
I sorry.
no, go ahead, talk about it, because I mean, it's again so many different things that are brought out, and yet you're still a proud Latina too.
Thank you. Yeah, like I feel like with this story, it was the first story that I wrote that wasn't so much like this is about what it's like to be like an intersectional identity person. It's not like, oh, this is what it's like to be queer and Latina and you know, autistic. She just is all of those things. And she just gets to be all of those things without it being necessarily educational or having to to be like this is what it's like to, anything like that. So I really wanted to hit on, the topics that a lot of teens go through, especially like consent and consent at that age, especially if you are autistic or selectively mute like Ari is, not always being able to say what you want and what you don't want. And so I wanted to explore that and like how they can kind of see what, how she can express herself in a way that she feels comfortable with. And I thought that was really important too. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous, but
but yeah, all of you show have books, and this is Pride Month. And I don't know if you feel like I do, when it's Black History Month, and all of a sudden we're bam, 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 bam. Here it is. Let's be Black. And then here it is. Let's celebrate. But you know what? I tell people, I said, I'm Black all the time.
Yeah.
You're prideful all the time.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have a single month that where really focuses on it. But you all are living this life in truth all the time and are proud of that.
Definitely. It's like, it's for all of us, we walk into a room and just instantly our being is politicized without us being asked if that's what we want to have the conversation around our personhood to be. And so you're exactly right. It goes way beyond just June 30th. And it is especially important right now in this time of record-breaking book bans and censorship that we keep our conversations going, that people outside of the queer community read those so that they can just get to know us better as humans and understand that it's not just about if the month starts with J and ends in E. It's about just if we all have hearts and we're all human beings, which we all are, and it's about that connection.
Right.
Absolutely. And about
Talk about the book
a
banning.
real commitment to your point, that Pride goes beyond 1 month. It goes beyond a hashtag or, one show of solidarity a year. There's a lot happening against our community, both in the United States and around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we're here asking for support and allyship year round for the lives we're living.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Epic Reads Tour is some way for you to really touch your folks. Talk about that, because I know you're in DC today, but also on the 14th, and this will be out by then. So talk about the tour and how excited you are to be part of that.
Yeah, I'm so just like excited to reach new people that maybe wouldn't have, heard of our books before, or maybe wouldn't have picked them up if they hadn't seen us say something about it. Or I think it's so important for us to get the opportunity to, talk with you and to talk with, so many people and readers, to get to just reach them and see, especially young readers, we're here, we're doing the thing, we're gonna keep telling stories. And kind of going back to the Pride thing, it's just I feel like Pride is resistance, and we are kind of doing that in showing ourselves and just being open as much as we can.
100%. It's the absolute coolest to be able to walk into a room and have readers there in front of you to celebrate your books and want to get to know your books. Like when I was a kid, I could count on less than one hand how many books I knew of that had queer characters in them. And most of them were trauma stories. And those stories have a very important part in queer literature and the queer canon in general. But it's so great that we can just we're just a tiny drop of the authors of the queer community right now. And that's such an amazing, cool thing to celebrate.
Yeah, I also just want to say, give some props to our publisher, who obviously something like an Epic Pride tour is organized by the publishers, and we're getting a lot of pushback on the kind of stories we're telling. As I'm sure you know, there's book bans, so for a publisher to stand by us and give us this opportunity to be visible at a time when a lot of people are trying to make us invisible means a lot. And I think there's a real lesson there in terms of how the companies of the world can truly support the LGBTQ community during Pride Month. Give us an opportunity to share our voice and our stories with people, to show our humanity.
and show that you're just, I'm sure when you see a lot of these young teens or young adults coming in to see you read and seeing their parents with them, the support is way beyond just what they're giving you. It's also helping uplift families and opening the eyes of a number of people.
Absolutely. Like I always try to include a little layer in my books that is sort of an example for parents about how this doesn't have to be a whole like earth-shattering, life-shaking thing when your child comes out to you. It can just be an exploration for both of you, because when your child comes out, they don't know all the answers about themselves yet. They're just barely beginning their journey of life. And so you as the parent don't have to have all the answers either. We're in this together, and as long as we lead with love, that's the best we can ask for.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, because I'm sure a lot of your listeners are hearing the two words parents' rights put together quite often in the news these days. I am a parent. I have two incredible 11-year-old twins who I love with all my heart. And I often find that conversations around families and parents' rights really only refer to heterosexual parents. And I think if we're going to talk pride, let's also talk about including queer families when we talk about parents, because we do exist and we also have our needs, and we are going to share our lives and our culture and our history with our kids. And so I think that's something that needs to be discussed quite a bit more.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sonora.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, like kind of touching on that. I feel like it's very, parents' rights is something that we hear a lot regarding what a parent is allowed to let their kid read, but it's not necessarily what they're letting their own kid read, it's what they're letting everyone else's kids read too. And I think that's really important to distinguish, is like your rights as a parent don't extend to other parents and how they parent their kids. So I wanted to add that.
Well, I always go back to the governor of Virginia when he was running. He was saying, he was going to ban a lot of the Black literature, but many other things. And he says, we don't want our kids to be taught what we don't want them to learn. I go, my parents wanted me to learn everything.
Right.
And to read as much as possible. And, I was reading some James Baldwin when I probably should not have been.
My favorite.
Okay.
The icon.
My favorite author.
One of my absolute favorite authors. But one of my teachers told my parents, she said, if she doesn't understand, she'll come to you and she will ask, what does this mean? And if not, let her read anything she wants to. And that's what parents should be doing, letting their kids learn, because this world is not just about the little place where they live.
Art creates empathy. Good art should create empathy. And, to your point, yes, they're banning, the book I was required to read before going to high school was I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. That book is being banned.
Yeah.
Toni Morrison is being banned. And what I always tell people is your kids are going to be going to school with other kids who are queer, who are Black, whose grandparents may have been born in a Japanese internment camp, who, we have all these diverse experiences of trauma that we've experienced. If you're privileged enough not to have that, you should be inspiring your kid to have empathy for those kids, because they're, I always tell people, well, what do you expect? That I'm not going to tell my own child what it was like to grow up gay when I was growing up, and the shame and stigma? Of course I am. That's my lived experience that I'm going to share with my children. And their classmates should have empathy for our family, as I want them to have empathy for others.
Yeah.
You're shining a light on the more positive needs. What else are you guys doing? Because I know this tour is going on. You're in DC, New York, Atlanta area, and then what goes on?
Oh man, it's back to the keyboard. So
Yeah.
much of the time. Yeah. It's so nice to be able to actually speak with other fellow authors and with you, Maggie, and because usually it's in our sweatpants in front of a keyboard, and I haven't showered for 5 days.
He's not speaking for us all there.
And I was getting ready saying, so someone must really love you.
Yeah, I have a very loving husband who puts up with the hot mess that happens here.
Yeah, same. Like going back to writing more books, writing more queer books, just telling all the stories where, you mentioned earlier how we're just like one drop and how before it was like, mostly trauma books. Like my gay agenda or whatever is just to have more variety. So I want to contribute to the variety of books, queer books that we get to read. So no matter what someone is wanting, they'll be able to hopefully one day walk into a bookstore or a library and be able to find it.
Love it.
Yeah.
You're
As
here.
you, yeah, I was getting ready to say, and the writer's strike is on right now, Abdi. So how's that going, huh?
It's going. I mean, I've picketed quite a bit. Obviously, I'm here now. I'm in a strange position of both being on strike and then also promoting a book. So I'm very aware of the privilege I have on like a lot of other screenwriters who don't have another career as an author. But I genuinely believe the issues at stake are existential issues that not only face writers, but also will soon face almost all workers, because a lot of the issues are about AI replacing workers. AI will soon be able to mimic the voice of a writer or the face and voice of an actor, and will soon be able to replace most human work. And so, the writers really are asking for protections so that this job can remain a job that people can do. And I personally deeply believe in keeping the humanity in the arts. Art should come from the soul, not from technology.
Electronics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And a lot of the streaming services and stuff too, it's like, come on, give us our I'm a SAG after member, okay?
Oh,
So
you are?
oh,
Well, get
yes.
ready.
Oh yeah. Oh, we've done some picketing in the past, and there may be more to come, but
Yeah.
um we have to be paid for the images, the writing, and things that we do. And I know you all are hoping one day to see even more inclusiveness with the books, like you were saying, and maybe having some of those be created and moved into movies and things along those lines. You write, all three of you write so visually, and that is something to be really welcomed. And it's so many of the books that I read, especially for teens, I find them the kind of books that their parents should also be reading. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, very much so. So listen, thank you all so much for chatting with me. Talk again just quickly about what you'd like to leave, all three of you, what you'd like to leave with our audience.
That's such a great question. I think for me, it's been my theme lately because I think we're getting increasingly divided across all communities and spectrums, not just politically, but everywhere, that we push away the people that seem to think differently than us or appear differently than us or any of that. And I think we need to lead with love and just remember that whoever you're interacting with is a human, and that if we can lean into that humanity and find, there's something, I know for a fact, there is at least one thing you have in common with any person you meet. And if you can lead with that, I think it's going to really help us get away from this time of just pushing folks away.
Nora?
Yeah. I guess I will give my message to the kids, the teens, and anyone who my books are for. Just that, no matter who you are or what kind of, like if you are a messy person, if you make mistakes, if you're angry, whatever, like you still deserve to fight for your joy and happiness, and you deserve a happy ending too.
Abdi?
I think for me, it would just be every human being lean into curiosity. I agree, there's so much division out there, and I think a lot of it is based on feeling like we've made up our minds about others as opposed to asking them about their lived experience and how they feel. And I think if we all just exhibit a little more curiosity toward others and allowed them to be the protagonists of their own story, maybe we could start healing.
Yeah, we all need to do kindness
Yeah.
also. Kindness comes with understanding, and understanding helps lead us all forward. And I don't need to believe everything that you believe in order to be kind.
That's
Yeah,
right.
100%.
Okay. Well, listen, many thanks to New York Times bestselling and award-winning authors, Jason, Sonora, and Abdi. And you can meet them on the Epic Reads Tour. Next stop in DC at Politics and Prose on Wednesday, June 14th at 7 p.m. and in New York on Friday, June 16th at Charisse Books and More at 7:30 p.m. More on today's best-selling and award-winning authors. Number one at Hey Jason June on Instagram and Twitter, Sonora Reyes on Twitter and Instagram at sonora.reyes, and Abdi Nazemian as at Abdaddy on Instagram and Twitter. Oh, I love that last name. Until next time, seek peace and spread lots of love. I'm Maggie Linton.